We start in Moscow, as a crazy conspiracy theorist is telling CIA operative Everett K. Ross about how 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, how chemicals in the water are turning the frogs gay. I mean, how there are secret alien reptiles that have secretly invaded Earth all secretly and shit. And before you can say, I think David Icke's going to see someone, this tinfoil nut job reckons that said super secret alien reptiles called Skrulls are totally trying to incite nuclear war between Russia and America. And before I can say, well, it better not involve blowing up pipelines because that's a bit too close to home at the mo, he hands over his evidence to the CIA agent what totally works for the good guys, before randomly going all paranoid and thinking this bloke what looks like Hollywood A-lister Martin Freeman might just be a bit of an imposter, given this BAFTA award-winning actor has suddenly appeared in the middle of his house in the dead of night. So naturally tries to strangle him real good and proper. But said BAFTA award-winning Hollywood A-lister ain't going to go down that easily and promptly shoots a tinfoil nutter through the left titty. Damn! Anyway, CIA operative Everett K. Ross then gets the heck out of Dodge and soon tells his own wrist that he's being chased and totally needs extraction ASAP. But unfortunately, Tyler Rake is a bit busy getting blown up and smacking up legendary gangsters in his new sequel currently streaming over on Netflix, and so he has to make do with some bird called Maria Hill coming to his rescue. Naturally, because she's a woman, she can't even do her one job properly, and he ends up falling off a small roof before she can make it to his location. No! But in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, turns out Special Agent Everett K. Ross, what as the face of Hollywood A-lister Martin Freeman, was totally one of them Skrull fellas in whiteface all along. Before the guy chasing him reveals himself to be that bad guy bloke what then became a good guy bloke at the end of that Captain Marvel film from a few years ago. And if you ain't seen said Captain Marvel flick yet, and if this is totally your first Marvel movie experience ever, then good luck following any of this shite. Anyway, after a 2-minute and 3-second opening title sequence, what's literally made by AI because Marvel was too cheap to pay actual artists who need to eat and pay rent, Maria totally redeems herself and finally makes it to the location of another special agent, this time without them falling off a small roof and dying in an alley, and she welcomes Agent Nick Fury back to Earth with a warm hug. Later, said Nick Fury fella reunites with old ally Talos, because he last saw him at the end of Captain Marvel, which was set in the 1990s, so this is totally the first time that they've seen each other in 30 years. Or some shit. And before you can say, why is this one alien Australian, Talos whines about all that's happened in the intervening years, and how his daughter Gaia totally rebelled and joined some Skrull rebels, because they're fed up of not having a home since it was destroyed by the Kree at the start of Captain Marvel 30 years ago. And seriously, you've totally got to watch that film before even attempting to sit through this show. And he eventually got kicked off the Alien Council and exiled by his own people, when they started wanting to do a bunch of bad things after they felt abandoned by S.H.I.E.L.D. just dumping them on Earth and not finding them a new hospitable planet to live on as they promised 3 decades ago. Anyway, lead rebel called Gravik is apparently hiding out in Russia, and now has schematics for a dirty bomb, what he's going to use to start a war between the Yanks and the Ruskies. So they totally need Fury's help on this one, because by dirty bomb, he means a world-ending nuke, and not just what my mate Dave leaves behind in the bog on Taco Bell night. Elsewhere, Colonel James Rhodes, aka War Machine from the Avengers movies, tells President Ritson that Agents Fury and Hill are officially AWOL, but the President just says stop being a little snitch and just deal with it already. Later, this furious Nick fella goes for a walk, and after staring at a little girl with a pride ball and wondering if she might be one of them naughty shapeshifters just lurking around, he soon gets kidnapped and taken to a fancy mansion. Gah, no fair. Last time I got bundled into a van in the middle of the night, I just had my pinky finger chopped off after no fucker could be bothered to pay my ransom. Liberties! Anyway, here he meets MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth, who's an old friend of his apparently, and totally rejects his proposal to do a trucy team-up, because she don't really need a special agent partner who can't walk down an empty street without being kidnapped by British spies. But he says that he totally let them kidnap him, also he could have a face-to-face meeting with her. But she just says stop all this desperate coping, Gimp boy, and get the heck out of my fancy mansion already. The next morning, a black bloke called Beto turns up at the rebel base and reverts to his natural form to prove he's a Skrull, and then goes straight back to doing blackface. 'cause otherwise he'd be racially discriminated against walking around town with a minority skin colour and totally face a bunch of unfair prejudice and shit. But anyway, a top totty British chick then welcomes him to the place that they're now calling New Skrullos, which just seems to be a gloomy disused nuclear power station over in Russia, and presumably they can't even get a 5G signal up here, and so the only entertainment is having a small kickabout and riding around in wheelbarrows and stuff. Here we meet Gravit's main lackey, Pagan, who tells one of his new rebel members to take the form of a random Russian bloke and then absorb his mind because reasons. After using a bug to eavesdrop on Sonia trying to convince a UK Prime Minister that a bunch of little green men are totally hiding out on Earth, and her source for this is literally lol, trust me bro, Fury and Talos locate another Skrull rebel called Vasily Poprishchin. Fury and Talos locate another Skrull rebel called Vasily Poprishchin and arrive just after the phony fakey British alien chick buys something mysterious off him. So they proceed to interrogate the shifty art gallery owner whilst Fury channels his inner Marcellus Wallace. And before he can say,
"What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time."
Said shifty art gallery owner totally denies being involved in any dodgy shit and starts smacking them all up to prove his innocence. Naturally, Talos, who's still in the form of an out-of-shape gammony Australian, struggles to beat the member of his own species, currently in the form of a fit and athletic Asian man, and promptly gets thrown around the room like a Chris Brown floozy. And before he can say, if these people can shapeshift, why not just become Arnold Schwarzenegger from Commando, rather than stay as a middle-aged Aussie with a porky paunch? Fury soon loses patience and shoots a fella dead, and Talos is all butthurt about his current mate killing his other mate right in front of him and shit. But Fury just says, "Listen, son, you were 2 seconds away from getting a shrimp stuffed up your Barbie, so you're totally welcome, bro." Meanwhile, Maria tracks a shifty British chick down into some tunnels, before getting herself smacked up by a clear and obvious stunt woman, until Talos randomly appears due to the magic of lazy editing, and totally confronts that naughty Brit. But said naughty Brit turns out to be his long-lost daughter, Gaia, who's totally carrying dirty bombs which she refuses to hand over. So he tells her that her mum was killed by her rebel friends and that her last wish was for them to reunite. But she says, "I don't want to reunite with some pussy old Australian bloke with a beer belly, so shut up about it already." Then Nick and Maria catch up over a chess game, where he reveals he's been taking some vacation time up on a super secret space station called Sabre. And she implies he may have been a little bit traumatised after being reduced to dust particles when that purple bloke with the ball-bag chin did a sassy finger snap and killed half the universe. Or some shit. And she wonders if he's really still up to fighting aliens and saving the world like in the good old days when he was still semi-competent and didn't get himself easily kidnapped by spies or turned to dust like a right melt. Bruh. But anyway, Gaia delivers the bombs, but soon starts to have a crisis of conscience after realising that the people she's delivering weapons to apparently also killed her alien space mummy. So she arranges a secret meeting with her Australian dad and tells them all exactly where the rebel fellas are planning to do all their terrorism and stuff. So the next day, Talos, Fury and Hill scope out the square to locate the bombs, but turns out these super sneaky secret invaders have used decoy bags. Though, after seeing the same little girl with her rainbow pride ball thing, and before stopping her from saying, "I've come to talk to you about my pronouns," Fury tracks this shape-shifting terrorist, where she reveals himself to be none other than that Gravik fella, who detonates the bombs and sends multiple innocent fuckers flying. And in the ensuing carnage, Maria casually forgets that they're surrounded by multiple shape-shifting hostile alien terrorists, and gormlessly wanders up to a suspiciously happy Fury, who promptly pops a slug in her gut. Because in another shocking twist, what no one could ever possibly see coming, turns out her boss doesn't still hold a grudge over her implying he has PTSD like some pussy old melt and also for beating him at chess, and was actually secretly Gravik in disguise.
No way!
And he looks like it's curtains for the most underused and now totally wasted character in all of the MCU, as panicking civilians just casually run past her dying ass like yesterday's dirt. And that's it. That's episode 1. Though my favourite part was when Gaia was driving Beto back to their base, in front of a comically large steering wheel what seemed to be twice as big as her head. But anyway, on to episode 2. We start in Brixton, London in 1997, And before you can say, how can this be mid-90s Brixton when the fucking Shard is in the top corner of the establishing shot? We cut to two green peeps visiting a silky smooth chocolate fella, who turns out to be none other than a baby-faced Nick Fury, who's totally been de-aged and shit. Apparently, the smaller one is a child version of that Gravik fella, and Fury randomly headbutts the poor kid and tells him that he could totally join their gang, even though their work is pretty dangerous. Because he just can't resist having shape-shifting child soldiers in his spy group where he can groom into becoming disposable pawns, or even potential Avengers in the near future if they're good enough and don't talk back. So Fury then asks a bunch of these alien refugees to totally take a pledge to help him keep the Earth safe, in exchange for Fury and that Captain Marvel bird from her eponymous and terrible film finding them a new planet to go live on. So they all totally agree, and soon assume their human forms what they'll have to wear all the time now that they've committed to living as pussy old earthlings for the foreseeable future. And rather worryingly, they must all be a bunch of white supremacists, given most of them instantly choose vanilla-y pigments and clearly seem to want to live as honkies and shit. And the notoriously devious super spy totally promises the group that if they keep their word, then he'll defo keep his. Then we cut to the present-day aftermath of them giant explosions, as Fury is dragged away from the corpse of that generic white woman what did fuck all throughout the last epi and also the MCU as a whole, and smuggled the heck out of Dodge by disguised Talos in Australian whiteface. After the opening titles, Talos and Fury are hiding out on a train, where said Fury fella talks about his beloved mama from Alabama, and how they'd eat fried chicken on train trips back in the day whilst playing a game called Tell Me Something I Don't Know. So in order to pass the time and also progress the plot, this super sneaky super spy asks the secret alien fella to tell him something what he doesn't know. So he just says, sometimes when I'm alone, I transform into you and explore your chocolatey body. Achoo! I mean, there's actually over 1 million Skrulls now milling around on Earth and walking amongst your species. And before he can say, well, that certainly explains that Zuckerberg freak, Talos clarifies that his people are all being hunted across the universe, and so he had to totally invite them all over to the Earth for asylum without even asking the permission of his hosts and she. Naturally, Nicky Boy is furious at the thought of 1 million undocumented illegal aliens just flooding across Earth's atmospheric open borders what no one can ever tax, track or trace, and is presumably even thinking of getting that orange bloke to build a giant cosmic wall in orbit or something. And Talos is pretty peeved too, given his mate just left them high and dry after getting dusted by a sassy finger snap and then fucking off to a giant space station for an extended vacation after he's also magically resurrected by a giant green troll fella. Or some shit. Anyway, they have a right Barney, and a furious Nick Fury kicks his Australian bum buddy off the train, and Talos is so angry and confused that it makes him flip genders. Later, over in London, which now correctly has a Shard in its establishing shot given it's set in present day, Maria's mum totally bollocks Nick for getting her daughter shot up worse in a Christian school in Nashville. Man, this guy just can't catch a break. Elsewhere, the news informs us that over 2,000 people died in those explosions last epi, what the good guys totally failed to stop going off. And they now have a Yankee suspect in custody who's the alleged leader of a terrorist group called Americans Against Russia. And naturally, the Ruskies are totally planning retaliation, because they reckon that coming over here and blowing up our pretty town squares just ain't fucking on, son. And we even see a Fox News type anchor who suggests that the Unity bombing in Moscow was a false flag and stuff. Later, Gaia escorts Gravik to a meeting, and then tells her that if he ain't back in an hour, then she should totally shoot the guard in the noggin. And before he can say, well, that's a bit out of order, mate, because I'm just doing my freaking job, he enters a council meeting with a bunch of high-profile world leaders, including the NATO Secretary-General and the UK Prime Minister, and even that phony-fakey Fox News type anchor what loves spouting conspiracy theories on national TV. And turns out they're all Skrulls who have secretly inveigled their way into top positions and secretly invaded the world all secretly and shit. And before you can say, surely Bill Gates and that musky fella has to be one of these fuckers, they then bollock poor Gravik for killing 2,000 innocent humans and bringing the world to the brink of war, which could totally expose him. But he says that lying Fury Git totally lied to them about keeping his word when he promised to find them a new home back in Brixton 1997. And so he's now taking over command and starting a proper war with them human peeps, and they all promptly submit to his command. Well, except that stunning and brave Indian lady. But he lets her go without harm, which conveniently allows her to go tattling to Talos, who asks her to set up a meeting between him and the new boss man pronto. Later, the UN convened an emergency security summit and just can't believe the American president couldn't be bothered to show up when two of his country's own rogue agents just happened to visit Moscow at the exact same time a giant bomb went off and almost sparked World War III. But Colonel Rose just says that Nick Fury and Maria Hill potentially possibly being in Moscow on the same day at the same time is just Russian disinformation, bro. Just like Hunter Biden's laptop and how there's only two genders and shit. And even if they were possibly potentially maybe there on that day at that time, then they were potentially possibly maybe there as private citizens as opposed to being there in any official capacity as government assets. But they totally weren't anyway, so you should all just stop spouting baseless conspiracy theories and shut up about it already. Naturally, Rhodey Boy immediately meets up with his old boss Nick, because going AWOL, getting his colleagues killed and then making him have to sit in front of an international panel of professional bollockers just to clean up his messes, just ain't fucking on, son. But Nick just scoffs and tries to tell him that a bunch of little green spacemen have totally infiltrated the upper echelons of human society. But Rhodes says it's just not possible for the domestic government and international spy agencies to be invaded from within, even though that's precisely what happened to them with Hydra barely even a decade ago. But now Rhodes just scoffs, so this furious Nick fella desperately tries to pull the race card for him to, quote, help a brother out. But the Colonel just says, I don't care about no stinking race card, before he goes full Donald Trump and says, you're totally fired, son. Still in a state of shock, Nick then collapses on a bench and has a little cry, because he can't believe he just got fired from his own organisation by a bloke who was on his Avengers team not too long ago. Liberties! Elsewhere, MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth enters a local butcher's and walks into some sort of interrogation going on in the back freezer. Lol, as you do. She then orders everyone out before taking over said interrogation in the back freezer of her local butcher's and proceeds to cut off this poor bloke's finger, soon revealing him to be one of them naughty Skrulls. Turns out this chap is that alleged terrorist from the Americans Against Russia group, but who is secretly just an undercover Skrull in Gravik's army. So, naturally, she jabs him in the arse with a serum that boils her blood, and he promptly sells out his own people worse than an American senator. And he tells her all about his boss's secret plan to totally build a super machine that makes Super Skrull super stronger, and also where their secret hideout is and shit. Meanwhile, just outside said random freezer room, one of the Russian goons guarding the place gets penetrated whilst getting a sausage. Steady? Cause turns out Gravik totally found him and then starts shooting up the gaff. So MI6 agent Sonia Fallsworth gets the heck out of Dodge via a secret underground hatch, before Gravik rescues his scrully chum what just sold them all out after he got poked in the arse. But he totally lies and says I told the British filth diddly squat, bro. But said British filth have totally raided their compound, so they now know he's fibbing worse than Anthony Fauci in Congress. So they then take him out to the woods and pop a cap in his traitorous arse, so now he has 2 puncture wounds in his butt cheeks. Man, this guy also just can't catch a break. Elsewhere, a scaly non-white illegal alien is chopping up veg without even wearing gloves. And no, this ain't a typical server at your local branch of Subway. Because turns out this is Fury's wife, what also seems to love doing blackface. And he puts his wedding ring back on before snogging her face off. And that's it. That's the second epi. Though my favourite part was when an entire race devastated by war then casually declared war on the very race who took them in. And all because one man didn't keep his promise. Which was mainly due to the fact that he got turned into dust for 5 years straight by a giant fuck off purple alien fella with a scrotum gene. But anyway, that's a plot and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss episodes 3 to 4 when they drop. Tell me if you like this show in the comments if you have time. And I'll see you in the next one.